Well, today we are talking about becoming a remote landlord. Okay, so the basics of remote landlording. What the heck are we talking about when we even say remote landlording? Well, really, this may sound dumb, but remote landlording, managing a rental property from a distance. That really is the basis of it. And from a distance can mean something different to everyone. Some people don't invest more than an hour from their primary residence, while others go wherever market economics makes sense. One TurboTenant user I spoke with last year says that she will not invest in any property she cannot bike to. So depending on how hardcore of a cyclist you are, that could be a very narrow proximity, or it could be a very large proximity. But her point was she wants to be able to, while she's exercising, going on her bike ride, swing by the property, make sure, nothing crazy has happened. They haven't cut down a tree or, I don't know, ripped up all the grass or anything. Um, so, having those kinds of expectations in place and just figuring out what you expect from your property. If you want to be able to just swing by, then remote landlording probably isn't for you. But if you are looking for something that can actually cash flow better than your local market, maybe it's a good idea. So, some challenges of remote landlording. Like I said, you can't just swing by. And that means casually, like that woman I spoke with who likes to bike past her property. You can't really do that. Or in the case of an emergency. So that's the part that gives a lot of people pause. That if something goes catastrophically wrong at your property, that you won't be able to pop in and fix it. Now, we'll get to that a little bit later on, but uh, that is one reason why you have to have a team. You have to assemble a team you can count on. And the reason I put that in challenges is, as many of you may know, just having a plumber is different than having a reliable plumber that you can count on that is going to give you an honest price. So having the right team can sometimes be a challenge. But then there are the benefits of remote landlording. You can invest in a much cheaper market than the one you live in. I mentioned up at the top, I'm in the Denver area. Denver real estate has gone pretty through the roof in these last few years. And looking at buying a 3-bedroom 2-bath single family home around here is going to be pretty expensive. If you look somewhere in a cheaper area, Indianapolis or parts of Ohio, it's a lot cheaper, and that can be really attractive, especially if the other economics make sense. Then you can have much more cash flow. And then the other benefit, you can diversify your investments across multiple markets. If I am fully invested in Denver and something insane happens in Denver, all of my portfolio is going to be equally hurt by whatever that insane thing that happens. If you're spread across different regions, if all of a sudden the Rust Belt starts exploding, everybody's moving there, people are moving out of the Southeast, well, good thing you have properties in both. So that can be really nice to diversify your investments. All right, we're going to launch a poll. This one, we are asking, how far away would you consider buying a rental property? And this is purely hypothetical. If you only have one and it's right next door to you, I'm curious if everything else made sense and you had just, all of the cash flow, all of your numbers worked out exactly how you want them to, where would you invest? Okay, okay. The answers are rolling in. If you haven't answered yet, please do. It's looking like we have a pretty clear consensus here, which makes sense because you are attending a webinar about remote landlording. So obviously you would be into the idea. Okay, okay. We'll just give this a few more seconds here. All right, let's go ahead and end that poll and share it with the people. So how far away would you invest? Nobody says within my neighborhood. Yeah, that's fair. You want a little bit of space, right? It looks like 16% of you said within 25 miles, 8% said within 100 miles, 16% also said within 250 miles. And then a majority of you, 60%, said who cares? If it cash flows, I'm interested. That's awesome. That we'd love to see it. Okay, so a majority of you are not caring where it is. You are ready to jump right in. So I should say something else about a remote property is I do recommend seeing it. I've definitely talked with investors who there was a guy who was in LA. He owned a bunch of properties in I think it was Alabama. Yeah, I think it was Huntsville, Alabama, and he'd never seen them, never seen the properties, which is great if that works out for you and you have a property manager that you can trust and everything else is all squared away. Cool. But TurboTenant, we're really built for the DIY landlord. We really recommend at least seeing your property, being a little more hands-on with it. And the other thing I want to mention here, up top is whenever you travel to your remote property, save all those receipts, save all those expenses that you are accruing, your flights, your gas, your mileage, your hotels, whatever. Save all that because those are all tax deductible expenses. So, okay, getting into our first big hurdle. Say you want to get a remote property. How do you market it? So it doesn't matter where your rental is if you have no tenants. Some of you may be nodding, hearing this right now. I hope not. I hope you have not struggled with this aspect. But having a strong online presence is the first step. So, what do I mean when I say good marketing? Well, you got to have high quality photos. If you have come to our previous webinars, we did do a webinar all about marketing. I focus a lot on the photos. In my past life, I worked as a real estate photographer, so I'm very passionate about this one. You've got to have high quality photos. That is going to make or break your listing. It's going to really change the quality of the tenants that you get. And I think one tip I would offer here is after you close on a property, if you're intending to use that for your rental, use it as a rental, ask the real estate agent if they can just give you those listing photos. A lot of the times they have that. They'll just give it over. They've already paid for it. I mean, after the property has closed, they're not going to do anything else with it. So they may just hand that over to you, which would be really nice because then you can pop those right into TurboTenant and start marketing. Okay, what else does good marketing have? A listing description. Yeah, you've got the photo, but the photo, even though each photo is worth 1,000 words, they say, you've still got to have a description. You've got to tell people what is the layout, what are we looking at here. Hopefully your photos tell that story, but the listing description can also let them know what is nearby. Um, what is the living situation with neighbors, tell it in a very positive light. And then also, and this one is huge. This one is huge for remote landlords, virtual tours. So when we say virtual tours, I don't necessarily mean put on AR goggles and be immersed in it. You can do that if you want, but a virtual tour really could be as simple as just a video, just a walkthrough video. A lot of the times, if a real estate agent has photos, they may also have a walkthrough video of the property. Back when I shot photos, I also shot videos. So that is a pretty standard thing nowadays. Um, and then also listing sites. Once you have all these things, your photos, your description, your virtual tours, you got to put it on a listing site. So TurboTenant can help with these ways. So we actually have an AI listing description feature. I know you may be like, shut up about the AI, but this thing is pretty cool. So we're showing it right here on the right. Basically, you put in you give us a little bit of information, you give us the photos, you click that magic button there that's showing in this GIF, and boom, it spits it all out. Cool thing about this is if you are not very confident in your writing abilities, this will do a good job of just giving you a very standard, very, attractive description for your property. And very importantly, it won't violate any fair housing issues, right? So there's a lot of scary stuff out there about fair housing and how you can inadvertently violate some of the fair housing laws. This won't because we trained it specifically to not do that. So, and then I'm going to say it once again, don't skimp on the photos. If you think, nah, I've got this covered, I can take photos with my iPhone. You can, but if you're, shooting like this, it's not going to look good. it's not going to look good. This is something that you should absolutely pay for. Okay, where to post? Well, you can post on listing sites. TurboTenant does this. We've got another cool GIF here that shows all the places we send out to. We send to all of these. You make one listing description, you hit a button for marketing, and poof, it goes out to all of them. The reason that's cool for a remote landlord is that you're not there, right? You don't live there. So in the olden days, 20 plus years ago, probably, you would have to actually put a sign in the yard saying it's for rent. You would have to, I don't know, go to your coffee shop and put something up on a bulletin board if they have it there. You would want to get into Facebook groups, all these kinds of things. You can still do all of that, but the fact is most people are actually looking online. So you should also be looking online. And I will say, we spit out to all of these, right? And if anyone has used us, hopefully you've used us for marketing. I think it's an awesome way to find a whole bunch of high qualified leads. But using us in addition to social media, especially YouTube, if you've got that walkthrough video, post it on YouTube. Put the address up there. Put what you're charging for rent. Facebook Marketplace is another good place. Local Facebook groups with whatever area that you're in, always awesome. Okay, you've marketed. You've got that. What about screening and interviewing? Well, if you ask any veteran landlord what the most important part of the rental process is, they're going to say screening tenants. Any veterans on the call would like to disagree? I think screening tenants is the most important part. And the reason is you can never make a great pie if all your apples were rotten to start with. And by that, I mean, if you've got a terrible tenant, it doesn't matter how awesome your property is. Your property could be the most attractive one in your area. It could be beautiful. Everybody takes pictures of it driving by because they love it. But if you've got terrible tenants who either don't communicate or do crazy things like drilling into walls to put pipes up to hang stuff on, that's a real example, by the way, that we covered on our podcast. If you've got terrible tenants, nothing else is going to work out. So the first thing after you have your property and you feel good about the rent you're going to charge is you want to make sure you get good tenants. For remote landlords, this is very, very important, right? Because you are not going to be nearby. You won't be able to personally visit, at least not very often. And so you want to make sure that you've got a great tenant who can understand what you put in the lease agreement and will actually follow what is in there. All right. So virtual screenings. So obviously you're going to do your screening report. Always do a screening report. Make sure that you've got all of your criteria set up beforehand for exactly what kind of person you are looking for. So that means having a minimum credit score in mind. That means having things like monthly income in mind. Are you going to accept people with pets? Are you going to accept smokers? Etc. Right? Make sure you have all those things squared away before you ever start to market. And then once you do start marketing, get that screening report. If somebody meets your criteria, do a virtual screening with them. So you want to meet your prospective tenant before moving them in. It's great if you meet them in person, but we are talking about remote landlording here. It may not be possible to meet them in person. Most people nowadays are pretty comfortable with doing a FaceTime call, a Zoom call. I would recommend doing video if you can, because video is going to tell you a lot more than just a phone call. You'll be able to have, facial expressions, body language. You'll be able to have all of those things that you wouldn't with just a phone call. So, and the reason you're doing this is to just put a face to the name for them and for you. You really want to establish that kind of trust to see if this is someone who you're going to feel good about having in your rental property, especially when it's a rental property you're not going to be at much of the time. Okay, video is better than a phone call. Yes. So important things that I want to note here. You want to clarify the rules. So this is the time when you're doing a virtual screening, when you're talking with a prospective tenant, this is where you clarify everything. So ask them questions, have them ask you questions, things like the move-in date, the parking, the pets policy, smoking, lease dates, set expectations. Yes, I am remote, but I have a local team. We'll get to that in a minute. Ask any clarifying questions from their screening report. Were they kind of cagey about how much income they make, or was there something that just seemed a little unclear there? And then I do have an asterisk. I would be remiss not to mention this right here at the bottom, which is please always be aware of fair housing regulations. You want to establish screening criteria first before talking with anyone, and you always want to accept the first applicant that meets your criteria. You don't want to introduce any favoritism or any risk of discrimination. You want to say, yep, this person checked all my boxes. Yes, I had a virtual call with them. They seem great. They're moving in. And then the last thing that you can do on this type of call is ask reasons for moving. Ask for any landlord references. We always recommend that. Always a good idea to try and get in touch with their previous landlords. And whenever we say this on a webinar, we always get the question, how do you determine if it's a real landlord that they gave you the contact info for? One great tip, when they give you, say they give you a phone number and they say, this is my past landlord. When you call that number, just say, hey, I'm interested in your rental. Start the conversation that way. Because then that landlord is either going to say, oh, okay, which one? Or I don't have any currently available. What are you talking about? Or if it was a fake number and they gave you the number of their buddy, then that person's going to say, huh, who is this? What's going on? It can be a nice little double check just to completely cover your bases and make sure that you're actually talking to another landlord before you start asking them, how was this tenant? Were they a hoarder? Were they dirty? Were they, how'd they leave the place when they moved out? Were there any noise complaints? These are all kinds of things that you can ask, not discriminatory. Yeah. We did make a course on fair housing. You can find it at academy.turbotenant.com. It is called Fair Housing for Landlords. The whole point of it is to teach these kinds of things to make sure that you are not running into any issues with the Fair Housing Act because, it's good legislation, but it also, you can read about a lot of these court cases that arose from people accidentally, inadvertently violating the Fair Housing Act, and it can be a little eye-opening. Some of those fines are really, really big. Got fined like 16 grand, which don't know about you, but that would hurt. Okay, moving on. This one is not a poll. It's really just a question. I'm curious, all of you out there, you shared with us how large your rental portfolios are. Sounds like some of you have some pretty sizable ones. What's your favorite screening tip? Do you have any great wisdom? Please just leave it in the chat. Drop it in the chat and make sure that that is going to everyone. Trust but verify. Yes, always good. Always good. Take them at their word, but, maybe take an extra step to make sure they're not totally lying. All right, anyone else? What's your favorite screening tip? I think once you've done this for a few years, you figure out the right system for you. Yeah, use a pre-screener before showing. Eric says, make sure they have all their teeth. Okay. The burden of proof is on the potential tenant to provide references and resources for screening. Yep. Stacy mentioned use a pre-screener before showing. That is awesome. Yeah. We have that built into TurboTenant. If you do things through us, we have a pre-screener questionnaire. The whole idea with that is just to give you a little bit more information. So without you having to take that extra step of doing a virtual screening, then you can get a better idea. Who is this person? Who is this person who's going to be living in my property? Check local police reports. Look at the inside of their car if in person. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, it could tell you, if it's covered in dog fur, but they said they have no dog. Woo. Red flag. Wonder where that dog fur came from. Yeah, these are all good. These are all good. With any screening, just make sure you are consistent. We always get people asking, can I use social media? Especially if you're remote. It's tempting to be like, all right, that guy had an unusual name. I bet I could find him quickly on Facebook. You can do that, but make sure you are consistent in doing that with everyone. And also make sure you are screening for relevant stuff. I wouldn't say, does this person politically align with me? Is that relevant? Is that really relevant for having a good tenant? Okay, Alicia says sometimes the former landlords don't tell the whole truth because they want to get rid of them. Therefore, you want to check more than one landlord or place they stayed. That is a great point. That is a great point. Um, if you have a problem tenant and you just want them the heck out of there, and somebody else calls up and says, "Hey, how was this tenant?" You may be tempted to say, "Yeah, they're great. Yeah, take them, please take them, get them out of here." Yeah, definitely check more than one. Rhonda says, "I ask about smoking and pets since neither are allowed in my condo. I hope they're honest." Absolutely. I hope they're honest too. Yep. Another good thing is parking, right? I mean, especially if you're in a city, parking situations may be really limited. Asking about guests, asking about who do you intend to have over here? If it's a one bedroom and they're saying that they have three buddies who are going to be over all the time, also a red flag. Credit score of 700, never have late rent. Nice, Eric. Those are good ones. All right. Moving right along. So we've done our virtual screening. Then there's the other aspect, the virtual showing. Now, why does this matter? Well, they need to see the property. Depending on how you are going about becoming a remote landlord, maybe you don't live in the market you're investing in, but you are physically there. Cool. Maybe you wanted to stick around until you could get a good tenant into the property, and then you felt comfortable going home. That's great. You would show the property just like you would any other, right? You would set it up. What I'm showing here on the right, this GIF is showing our showing scheduling, which is built into TurboTenant. This is very cool. This is free to use. You can basically just set times that you're available, set times that they're available. Boom. We put them together and we say, here's the time that they're going to come by, see the property. But as a remote landlord, if you are, for instance, in Denver and you have invested in a property in Ohio, you may not fly out to Ohio to show the property in person, right? Maybe you want to do it remotely. So I would say, in addition to meeting your prospective tenant, you of course want to make sure that they can see the property. If they don't want to see it before signing a lease, well, that could be a red flag that they're a fraudulent renter. So I would say they've got to see the property. Even if it's just a video, even if it's just a virtual walkthrough, you got to see the property. I personally wouldn't want to rent somewhere that I had not seen, but I also wouldn't want to buy somewhere I haven't seen. So, you want to make sure they are seeing that property. If you're unable to show it in person, arrange for a realtor or other trusted partner to show it. And this, really starts to get into that team that you have to be a successful remote landlord. You cannot do this all yourself, right? Unless you have the most incredible tenants in the world, or, no, that's really it. If if you have the most incredible self-sufficient tenants in the world, who are going to do maintenance themselves and don't have any issues with anything, I suppose it's possible, but likely you are going to have a team. You're going to have a team in place. And starting here with the virtual showing, the realtor is really the one I would say you need to kind of lean on. A lot of realtors do a little bit of property management on the side. So maybe that property management is just things like this, showing, doing a showing for a property once it's listed. Some of them may do more. Some of them may actually want to have a side hustle as a property manager because it's a little more consistent maybe than their real estate gig. So I would say very important, make sure that you have someone who can show a property. Best case scenario, you've got a realtor who could meet your prospective tenant, show them, walk them through it. Maybe they're also FaceTiming with you on the phone so that you are, virtually there, so that you can answer any questions as they may arise. Okay, and that gets us into managing maintenance and emergencies. So this obviously is the scary part of remote landlording. A lot of you who are DIY landlords, you are able to make your cash flow larger, let's say, because you'll handle a lot of the maintenance yourself. Now that's easy to do if your property is down the street or 30 minutes away or something, and hopefully you don't have that many emergency maintenance tasks anyway. But that becomes impossible if you are managing a property that is states away. So that means you've got to have your team. And when I say your team, I mean all of these people in addition to others. So, maintenance, I would say make sure you have an HVAC person, a plumber, an electrician, sort of a general handy person, someone you can just say, hey, the tenant is saying the door is not closing right. Can you go over and take a look? And then anything for yard work. Yard work, I think, is often overlooked. A lot of people will kind of write that into the lease that the tenant is responsible for it. Uh, I've heard a lot of opinions on that. I know some landlords will never let their tenant take over the yard work because there's the risk of it being done poorly, or there's the risk of, what if they hurt themselves doing yard work? Is the landlord liable? That kind of thing. Uh, I would say just have an answer for it. With all these things, you just want to have a system in place. So definitely have a system for what happens with maintenance. What happens if these things arise? And then assembling your team, your realtor. I already talked about that a little bit, but the realtor, the one that you worked with to actually buy the property, they are already familiar with the property. They were likely already involved in all of the inspection report and everything else that you did as a process of buying the house. So loop them in. Hopefully you're working with a realtor who already is investor friendly. And so they're probably willing to stay in touch. Realtors only work because of referrals. So they obviously want to stay in touch with you. If things go well with this first remote property, hopefully you'll work with them to get a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth, et cetera, et cetera. I would say also a great idea to have a real estate attorney. So, and this is not somebody you meet with daily, but just having somebody you can run things by. This would be the person you send your lease agreement over to and say, hey, did I miss anything? The reason that's so important is that if you're investing in a different state, there are going to be different rental laws in that state. They're not going to be 100% different from the state you live in, but they are going to be a little different. There are some key differences. I mean, we see it sometimes if you go to a certain county within a state may have different laws as the rest of the state. Cook County, for instance, in Illinois has different laws than the rest of Illinois. And again, they're not 100% different, but they're different enough that you want to make sure you are covering everything. So a real estate attorney, really good for that. Also, of course, very, very useful if any issues arise, which hopefully they don't, but something like a payment dispute or any issues on the property or an eviction, again, knock on wood, but these things do happen. Also on your team, financial advisor. You may already have this. You may already have somebody you can trust with your finances, somebody you can kind of bounce these things off of, but always very important. And then I put local landlords on here. Well, why did I put that? If you're investing in another state, my assumption is that you know something about that state, right? If you just pull a state out of a hat and say, I'm going to invest there because those houses are cheap, you want to do some research first, right? You want to learn about that area. You want to learn what are the good neighborhoods, what are the bad ones, where are people moving to? You want to learn what are other landlords charging for rent? What are the other laws that landlords are putting into place? Having a local landlord group when you're a remote landlord can be so, so key for figuring out things like I just talked a lot about rental laws, right? If a state puts a new rental law into place, it can be really useful to talk with your local landlords and say, how are you guys navigating this, right? What are we changing, if anything? Do we think it's all smoke and mirrors? Who knows, right? Having your local groups can be so helpful for just fact checking stuff, for bouncing ideas. Can also be really useful for assembling all the rest of these things I listed here. Your local landlords are probably going to have a realtor they can trust, maintenance people they can trust, an attorney, financial advisor, et cetera, et cetera. All right, emergencies, whether big or small, these are definitely the bane of the remote landlord's existence. And I put remote landlord here, but let's be honest, it's the bane of every landlord's existence, right? This is the thing that scares people when they're thinking about investing in real estate is What the heck do I do when I get a 2 a.m. phone call from my tenant saying that the hot water heater burst, or that, a sink backed up, or a toilet's flooding, or I'm just listing plumbing nightmares, but we know there are many, many other kinds of nightmares that can arise. And yes, these things can be scary. Thankfully, they do not happen that often. And the key to being able to figure it out is, I would say, have a plan. Clearly outline tenant responsibilities in your lease agreement. That is key. We recently made a video about smoke alarms because that was something we saw kind of taking off, that is changing the batteries in the smoke alarm the tenant's responsibility or the landlord's? Well, it's the tenants, but also that's something you should put in your lease agreement. You should outline those things. If you feel like something is unclear, put it in that lease agreement. Because once you sign it and once your tenants sign it, then that thing is legally binding. And hopefully it's also in a place that everybody can reference it. So when they have a question of, wait, who's doing the yard work? Who's changing the batteries in the chirping smoke alarm? They can go right back to that lease and get their answer. Just make it super clear. And then going beyond that lease agreement, I would say plan for every eventuality. This isn't fun, but it is necessary. What happens if there is a wildfire that affects your property? We all just saw what happened in LA. That was horrific. I would love to say that that won't ever happen again anywhere else, but I think we all know it probably will. Hopefully, it's not nearly as bad as that. Hopefully, it doesn't affect any of you or your properties, but planning for it can be very helpful. So wildfires, I'd also say floods, snow. If you're somewhere like I am here in Colorado, it snows. It snows. We don't get catastrophic snow, but snow happens, right? Putting in there what happens when it snows. Whose responsibility is it to shovel the walkways? How long do they have to do it? All of those things. Planning for every eventuality, like HVAC outage, power outage, break-ins, uh, theft, what noise complaints. Just, I would say, write out everything you can think of, every worst case scenario. How am I going to tackle it? And that list is going to scare you. You're going to look at it and say, oh my God, these are all the reasons not to invest. But the reason you do it is because now you're in a headspace where, okay, I've considered the worst case scenarios. Now I think I'm ready to tackle it. And once you have that plan, communicate it. Communicate this with your team, to your tenant. And maybe not all of it to your tenant. You don't want to scare the crap out of them, right? You want them to be ready to move into your property and be an awesome tenant. But communicating what your plan is with your team can be really, really useful. Because hopefully not, but say a flood happens or a wildfire happens, you can say, hey, team, this thing is happening. Here's the plan. Here's what we're doing. So just as I said with your screening criteria that you want to set it and actually follow it, same thing here. Set a plan. What are your possible emergencies, and follow that plan. I'd also say this goes with sort of your routine maintenance. So when you're buying a property and you get the inspection done, the inspector, if they're good, hopefully they are, is going to say, that hot water heater needs to be replaced within the next few years, or the roof only has a few years left on it, or your sewer pipe is made of clay and it's going to crumble. These things happen. That inspector will hopefully give you how much life each of these things has left in it, and you can plan for that as well. So yeah, Eric just said in the chat, inspections 1 to 2 times each year. Eric, do you mean you as the landlord, or actually getting a certified inspector to come out and take a look? Regardless of which it is, I totally agree. Yeah, landlord. Yeah. So making sure that you are keeping an eye on all those things. We all know with every property that we own, there are certain things that scare us, that we know we're going to have to deal with. There are certain things that we are not scared of, right? Maybe we know the carpet's fine right now. I just put in LVP and it's awesome and it can stay. But some other stuff, like I know that roof is going to go. I know that next hailstorm we get, I hopefully will be able to get insurance to cover a new roof. Keep an eye on these things. That can really help. Okay, let's see. Looking at the chat here. Eric says landlord or property management. Yep. Yep, having something in place, right? And this goes back to what I said at the beginning of this, which is I personally investing remotely, I would definitely want to check in on my property a few times a year. So that's something else you can plan for, and put that in lease agreement. Put that in there that I'm just going to do an informal walkthrough, informal inspection, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to do it every 6 months or every 3 to 4 months or something. Um, that can help a lot. That can help a lot. If you've got a terrible tenant, that is going to show you that you cannot trust the tenant. All right. And now another poll. So this one is, what is your biggest challenge when managing emergency maintenance? Your choices: hard to anticipate, unreliable team, haven't had to deal with emergency maintenance yet, or other. And if you've got an other, leave it in the chat. I want to hear what your biggest challenge has been. Maintenance can be scary. Most of us are not experts in all of the different kinds of maintenance. And so sometimes it can feel like someone's just pulling a number out, throwing it at you. All right, Jennifer says, empowering the team to make the best decision they can at that time of the emergency and then standing by them. The team can be afraid to act without your permission. That is so true. That is so true. And that's something we hear a lot about using property managers, right? Property managers, they are there to take the call, but if it's something expensive or an emergency, a lot of the times that property manager will pass the buck on to you, which can be frustrating because that is why you had a property manager. So making sure your team is empowered to make those decisions can be really, really helpful. Eric says it happens on vacations and you have to scramble. Yeah, that always seems to be the case, doesn't it? And Thomas says, finding a reasonable price when the person knows I am remote. Oof, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. When you're remote, again, this is where it can be really helpful to talk with some local landlords. Get into local investment groups. I'm sure there are meetups that happen in your area. I'm sure there are Facebook groups. I'm sure there are other kinds of, maybe there's a RIA or some type of group that happens in your immediate area to your rental property. That can be so helpful to just ask questions, get honest answers about what kind of maintenance people can I trust. All right, we're going to end that poll. Share these results. So yeah, it looks like about a quarter of you said they're just hard to anticipate. Almost a third said unreliable team. 20% of you haven't had to deal with any yet. Oof, lucky you. Hope it doesn't happen. And then 25% said other. So awesome. Okay, we'll stop sharing that and move right along. Okay, so I talked a little bit about having a property manager. And you may think this is absolutely necessary for managing remotely. It's actually not. It's actually not. We hear from a lot of people that do not use property managers. The reasons not to use a property manager are plenty. But basically, a property manager takes between like 8 and 12% of your monthly rent every month. And in a lot of cases, like Jennifer here said in the chat, they sometimes don't feel comfortable actually making decisions. And so you may have a property manager because you felt like it's going to be too hard to manage this property that states away from me. But what you end up with is now you're kind of having to hold the hand of a property manager and you're still having to manage a property that states away from you. So we, obviously very biased, but here at TurboTenant, that's why we made our software. That's why we made this platform, is really to replace the property manager. It's to make it very easy for you to do this yourself. So that 8 to 12% that you would have been giving away every month, you can keep it. You can keep that. And hopefully it gets you that much closer to cash flow positive, or just makes you more cash flow positive. That'd be great. So using TurboTenant, you can do all of these things. We talked about marketing. We talked about screening. We talked about showing, scheduling. You can do all those in there. You can also message. You can create those state-specific lease agreements. We do have one for every state. We also have some that are county-specific. I singled out Cook County in Illinois. We do have one specific to Cook County, Illinois. But we made those because it can be really, really hard to stay on top of all these rental laws. Here in Colorado, we had a lot of new laws in the past, I'd say 3 years, that affected landlords. It can be difficult to stay on top of all those, especially if you are trying to build a multi-state portfolio investing in different places. So ours are state specific. They already cover all that stuff. You can then customize them if you want. You can also coordinate maintenance requests. You can accept rent payments, and we also have accounting. So last year we bought REI Hub, which is accounting software built for landlords. So we have that fully integrated into our system. The idea is we're giving you everything you need right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and open this up to questions. I did create this post. Lexi, would you mind just copying that and putting that in the chat for everyone? We do have a forum. So we launched this a few months back. It's called the Better Landlords Forum. It's on our website. It's just turbotenant.com/community. And we built the forum as a way to stay in touch, to keep discussions going like this one. So I made a post there about this topic, becoming a remote landlord. Click that link, check it out, start talking with us in there. Those of you who are remote landlords, I would really love to get your take. I want to hear your story. So drop it in there. You can log in using your exact same credentials that you use for TurboTenant. If you don't have any, totally free. But yeah, click that link. Come talk with us. All right, now how about some questions? SF Prop says, does TurboTenant advertise on Zillow? We do not. We do not advertise on Zillow. That is probably the most common question we get about our marketing. The reason is Zillow wanted to charge us a whole bunch of money to do it. That money we would have to pass on to our landlords. We don't feel that's right. We're one of the more economic options in this space, so we wanted to keep that. So no, we do not advertise on Zillow. I will say that our landlords on average get about 28 leads per listing. So even though we're not on Zillow, they don't seem to be hurting for that. They do see a lot of success through marketing with us. All right. Stacy said it'd be great if the maintenance portal could text the work order instead of just email. Yes. Awesome. That is a really good point. A lot of my maintenance team respond quicker to texts versus emails. Yeah, noted. I'll pass that along to our product team. That's a good idea. Okay, Thomas says, what does TurboTenant do to control or monitor pricing from your vendor services? Had a bad experience with a vendor charging me $400 for a $30 part. Goodness gracious. I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas. So we don't actually, we partner with Lula, which is a maintenance service. So, and the reason I didn't mention them here is they are not available nationwide. Lula is only in select markets. So it's possible they are in yours. They're in quite a few and they continue to expand. But Lula, if you sign up with them, they will handle that maintenance for you. And they have a team. They've got boots on the ground in the markets that they're available in. And you can actually set with them a threshold. So you can say anything under $300, just go ahead and do it. Anything more than $300, I would like to be notified first. That can be really useful for many reasons, but the biggest one being that you don't have to, get the phone call at 2 a.m. that every real estate investor dreads. Hopefully they can just take care of it, let you know afterwards. Hopefully the bill is not too high. So back to your question, Thomas, what do we do to monitor pricing? I'm assuming you mean through something like Lula. We, TurboTenant, actually don't. So Lula takes care of that. I know they've got their own customer support. And yeah, hopefully they're not fleecing you with that, because that would not be great. Okay, Eric said, I travel frequently, so I wanted to see this as a local/remote landlord. Awesome. Hope we answered some questions. Let's see. Jerry said, how to verify employment for tenants. How to verify employment. Lexi, I know we have a blog on that. Would you mind digging that one up? We put some tips in this blog of how to verify. You can call employers and you can just verify. Again, you have to stick to the facts. You have to say specifically, was this person employed by you at these dates, or if they're still employed by you. And again, you'll want to do a little bit of research to verify that the contact info you've been given is a real company, is an actual, hopefully like an HR department or something. Ask for pay stubs, absolutely. Um, you don't want to go beyond verifying employment. Again, I'm going back to the Fair Housing Act. You don't want to get into anything that could be discriminatory, but just literally verifying employment. Yeah, absolutely. You can ask for paycheck stubs. We do also have a blog on pay stubs. So, yep, Lexi just dropped that in. Awesome. Thank you, Lexi. But yeah, that blog right there, how to verify income, right? Unfortunately, it's really easy to fake a pay stub. So we give some pointers in that blog on how to spot a faked pay stub, but also, of course, talking with their employer or their previous employer or whatever um, could really help. Could really help that. Gerardo, you missed 75% of the meeting. Sorry to hear that. Will I email these slides? Yes. Yeah. So reminder to everyone, we have been recording. I will send out an email tomorrow to all of you with the recording, with this deck, everything else. Okay, let's see here. Looks like Stacy asked about Lula. Lexi dropped that in right there. So there's a link in the chat from Lexi if you're curious about Lula. Please do check that out. Um, I think we had a question a while back. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Looks like Lexi answered this one. But Roseanne asked, what is your take on having Wi-Fi locks and video cameras inside for a walkthrough? Uh, that can be great. It can be really nice, right? Especially having a Wi-Fi enabled lock when you are remote and when you know you're doing showings, doing those remote showings. That can be super easy because nobody has to be there. You can just say beep, I just let you in. That can be great. I'd still say it's always nice for just peace of mind if you have a person there on your team who is physically available to walk them through and to answer questions. Um, Having video cameras inside can be really awesome. I would say when you get a tenant, if you have Wi-Fi enabled locks and video cameras, either have a plan for how to pass those things over to your tenant um, or take them out. We've done a few videos on security cameras and rental units, and the gist of it is if you have them on the exterior, cool. Make sure everybody knows about them. Make sure it's in your lease agreement. There are very few instances where I would say it makes sense to put one inside. So I think you'll know if it makes sense for you. If you have a multifamily and you want a camera in the hallway or in the laundry room or something, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. But there's never a good reason to put it in a living space, in my opinion. Okay, what did I miss? Roseanne says, my daughter's in Georgia. Thanks to TurboTenant, she's handling the property and tenants' concerns in Massachusetts. And you're saving 8% for accounting only. It's much more to have them handle a repair. Awesome. That's so cool. I'm glad to hear that TurboTenant's working out for you. Okay, and is Lula owned by TurboTenant? No, Lula is not. Lula is not owned by us. They are just one of our partners. So we've got several partners. Our ethos here is really we want to build everything that makes it easy for you as the landlord, and then the stuff that we cannot as easily build, we're going to partner with people who already do that. So Lula is one of those. As I said, they are not available everywhere in the country, but they are expanding. So definitely check out that link that Lexi dropped in the chat and see for yourself if they're available in your area. And then, Lexi, you want to launch that last poll? And then, if anyone else has any other questions, any other, also, I just want to hear some stories. Anyone have a story of how their remote landlording experience? If you do, drop it in the chat. We'll be here a few more minutes. And then these I've had up on the screen for a minute, but essentially, we've got a mobile app. You can do everything, all that cool stuff I was talking about, TurboTenant. You can do that in our mobile app. We do have a separate app for renters. So that one's also available. That's our QR code on the left here. And then on the right, you can check out what premium is. TurboTenant is totally free for you, the landlord. You can do almost all that cool stuff I was talking about for free. We do charge a la carte for some stuff like lease agreements. And then if you get on our premium plan, which is one annual fee for an unlimited number of properties, you can have it all. The world's your oyster. We're always adding new stuff. So yeah, please do check it out. And then we do have another webinar end of this month. So if you are interested, it is on how to become the CEO of your rental portfolio. And we are co-hosting that with the two women who run Women Investing in Real Estate. You can find a sign up for that on our webinars page. It's just turbotenant.com/webinars. Okay, I'm going to let this go for just another minute. Oh, never mind. We ended it. Anyone have any final questions, final thoughts, final concerns? Okay. And that is where we'll end. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Hope this has been useful for you. And we hope we see you next time. Bye, everyone.